So let's talk about you surveying your garden. You'll need a plan of the existing garden. Now, you don't have to be good at maths for this or artistic, you just need to be logical and take your time. There are, however, a few bits of equipment you'll need, and one of those things is a 30-metre tape measure. Costs about £10 to £15, and you can get them in DIY stores or builders merchants. Other things you'll need: a clipboard, you'll need some A4 paper, you'll need a pair of compasses, sharp pencil, a rubber, a ruler, possibly a scale ruler, we'll talk about that later. You'll need a bigger piece of paper to put your final design on, and you'll need some sticky tape to keep it all in place. Now, having got all those bits and pieces together, we can go out into the garden and get started on the survey. Well, here we are in the perfect garden for practicing our surveying. It's really got everything we need. It's got hedges, a fence, tree in the middle, existing patio. But most of all, what we're looking for is something that's fixed and can't move about. And for our fixed points, we're going to use the back of the house. So to get started, we need to make a rough sketch of the outline of the garden and the back of the house. It doesn't have to be artistic, it's just for your eyes, but it has to be clear and logical. When we do the back of the house, remember to take in the doors and the windows, the downpipes, the taps, anything else that you think is going to be useful for you to know. So now for the measuring. We use a metric tape measure. You can do it in feet and inches if you want, but you'll find it really difficult. So let's have a close look at the tape measure to make sure we're comfortable with taking readings. I'm going to latch it onto the end of the building. Now, just to be sure, here is 1 metre. 1 metre and 50 centimetres is here, 1.5 metres. Let's look at 1 metre and 5 centimetres. That's here. That's 1.05. Now we're comfortable with using the tape measure, we'll start our survey for real. So we latch it on again to the end of the house, and we're going to do a linear survey, which means just doing it in a straight line. The advantage of this is that we don't have to keep undoing the tape measure. And also, if we do make a mistake, it's easy to spot where the mistake is. So, take in the outside of the door, that's 1.1 metres. And the other side of the door is, we'll call that 2 metres. Now, without letting go of the tape measure, I'm going to make a note on my drawing in the appropriate place of 1.1 for the one side of the door and 2 metres for the other. Now, looking backwards, I'm going to take in the outside of this window, which is 3.4, and I'm going to take in the other side, which is 5.2. Get that down on my notes in the appropriate place, and I'm going to proceed all the way along this back wall, taking in all the relevant details, and I'll keep going until I get to the conservatory. Well, so far so good, but what about things that are not part of the house but are close by, like maybe drain cover? It's always a good example. For that, I'm going to need to do an offset measurement. So we go from a known point, which is where we started, here on the corner of the house, and I measure out from it, put my tape down here, and I'm going to eye up where the centre of the drain cover comes, which is 0.65. I'll make a note of that on my drawing, and I'm coming out from this end point, 0.65. Now, from there, I have to come from the end point again, and very conveniently, that's the edge of the patio, so I don't need to fix it onto the house, and I'm going to run out to the centre of the drain, and that's 3.2. Make a note of that. That's my offset measurement out from the back of the house. Now, while I'm here, of course, I mustn't forget to just take the dimensions of the drain cover as well. Otherwise, I won't know which way they're facing and how big it is. So that's standard cover at 6.5, and that'll probably be 0.55 wide. So that's fixed our drain cover, even though it's not right up against the back of the house. So what about the boundaries? They can be tricky because they're not usually at right angles to the house. So there are two ways we can tackle boundaries and other distant objects. One of the ways is to do an extension measurement. We can only do this if we've got an end wall. So you fix the tape measure onto the end wall, and then you walk backwards, eyeing up the tape measure so that it's an extension of the wall. We know our tape measure is always at right angles to our baseline. And we keep going back until we hit the boundary, and it might be useful when you do to make a little discrete mark on the boundary, because you can use that as a cross-reference later on for another measurement. The other way of measuring things on the boundary is by a method of measuring called triangulation. This is really handy for things that are quite a distance away from the house, like the corners of the garden or a pond or a tree in the centre. To do this, we need two fixed points, and we need to know how far apart those points are. So we're going to use this point, point A, and we're going to use the other end of this wall and call that point B. It's really important that we know how far apart these points are, and we do because we included these in our first linear survey. So in order to measure the tree in the middle of the lawn, I'm going to use A here. So we fix the tape at this point here, and I'm going to walk back towards the tree. It can be helpful to have an extra pair of hands at this point. So now we need to mark that measurement down clearly on our plan. Now undo the tape and fix it at point B. And now we walk back to the tree again. So that's it for most of the measuring in the garden and around the back of the house. But what about slopes? We don't really want to get into hiring expensive surveying equipment, but there are one or two things we need to look out for. The most important is to check out your DPC, your damp-proof course. Now this is the waterproof membrane that you'll find at the base of your wall, and it serves to stop water seeping up from below, from the paving level or the lawn or flower bed, into the stonework of your house. Now it's important that the paving or the lawn or the flower bed is 15 centimetres below this DPC. Anything less and water will splash from here up onto your wall, breach the DPC, you'll get damp into the house. An easy way to measure a slope is using a piece of wood of a known length. This piece is 1 metre long, and you use a spirit level resting on top of it. I'm going from the flower pot over there, and I'm just going to lift it up until it registers level, and then I'm measuring from the ground to the underside of the piece of wood. Make a note of that. Keep doing this all the way down the slope. You'll have 1 metre intervals, which you add all those figures together will tell you the difference from the top to the bottom. If you have in the garden a horizontal, you can lay your tape measure along it, and then using a second tape measure, measure down to the slope from 0 and 1 metre and 2 metres and so on. And then by taking those figures away from each other, you have an idea of the slope. It's very simple and very effective. Now, although we fixed the corners of the garden boundary using triangulation, we still have to take a linear measurement to get in the change between the stone wall here, the hedge, and the distance between the house and the trees up there. So all I'm going to do is just fix on here. Ooh. Sometimes having an extra pair of hands would be good. So the last few things before you go home to get warm, do remember to make a note of the extent of the tree canopy, make a note of any areas that are really unusually damp or unusually dry or unusually shady, make a note of good views and bad views, anything that might need screening. Do remember to work out where north is, you might need to take a compass with you for that. And finally, take a small sample of soil so that when you get back home you can see what the pH is of your soil. And then you should have just about everything you need to begin the exciting part, the garden design. So here we are back in the office, ready to turn our very good and comprehensive survey notes into a real drawing. Now, we obviously can't make the drawing life-size because that would be silly. So we have to decide upon a kind of ratio of measurements outside to measurements inside. And a common ratio for an average size garden would be 1 to 50. Now, what does 1 to 50 mean? Well, there are 100 centimetres in a metre. So if we take it into our head that 2 centimetres indoors equals 1 metre outside, that is a ratio of 1 to 50. Now, if your garden's large, say it's larger than 25 metres long, you'll have to work at a ratio of 1 to 100. Now that's quite handy because on our ruler here, 1 centimetre there will equal 1 metre outside. Now, if you're prepared to part with a fiver, you can have a proper scale ruler. And this is very handy because it shows you 1 to 50 along here, 1 metre, 2 metres, 3 metres on your drawing. And if we turn it over, we've got the 1 in 100 scale, and then we can see 1 metre, 2 metres, 3 metres, 4 metres. So having got our detailed survey notes indoors, we now have to start getting the page set out ready for drawing. So I'll help myself to some tape. And I forgot to mention earlier on that a really useful thing to have is a set square. It's particularly handy for getting our page straight on our drawing board, or in your case, the kitchen table. There we go. So now it's square, I can stick it down. Now I've worked out already that my garden is about 25 metres by 17. So on a piece of paper this size means that if I start over in this corner, I've got a very good chance I'm going to fit everything in. So here we have the survey notes. And I can see I'm going to start up in this top corner with the place that we called A while we were outside. So I'll just kick off by putting in where I think the walls are going to be. So we just start off absolutely anywhere. Put in our right angle. So that equates to A on here. I'll just put A there because we'll be referring to that spot again. So coming down from A with my scale ruler, and remember I'm using 1 to 50, I'm going to put in the door and the first couple of windows. Now the door is at 1.1 and the far side of the door is at 2. And I've shown that it opens inwards in that fashion. So that's the door, that's the movement which it opens. Okay, now because this was a linear measurement, all the measurements run down from that 1 point. So we've got the beginning of the window at 3.4. We've got a drain at 3.8. We've got a tap at 4.05. But we've got the other side of the window at 5.2. And I can join those up now to demonstrate window. We've got another downpipe at 7.9. And I need to continue the line of the wall as we're coming down this way. So back to A again. The window here is at 8.3 and it goes on until 10. The conservatory starts at 10.6, so that's the end of that measurement. Now I'm using my parallel motion to give me the right angle that takes me along the conservatory wall. You'll have to make do with your set square to get that right angle. So this was the point in this angle here that we identified B for our triangulation. So I'll just write that on so we're clear about that. Now coming along from the main house wall along the conservatory, we've got the first door at 0.4 and the second part of the French windows there at 2 meters, and the wall actually goes round the corner then at 2.5, so just mark that. I'll put the doors on so we don't get confused. They open outwards like that. I'll just rub out the end of that line because we don't need it to go on. Now, in order to get the conservatory angles, I measured on from 2.5 to 385, and that was the point where I was able to eye up the end of the true end of the conservatory. So I'll just put a line in there so we know roughly where that goes. Now, we came along here 385, but then the conservatory angle started again at 0.75. So I'll have to do that from here. 0.75. Now, just using a straight line, any straight line will do. It gives me the angle of that first bit of conservatory. We'll rub out the other lines. And then coming on down here, you can see that we've got 1.5 for the end of the conservatory wall. So you've got the idea now. I'm going to go down into the corner, round the conservatory, and then just finish off the back of the house. Now you'll remember that one of the ways we surveyed the boundary was an extension from the spot that we called A. Now on the house that's here, on the drawing that's here. So I called that point that we reached on the boundary H, just for clarity. So I've got a measurement on my drawing that says from A to H, H to A is 23.5 metres. So I've got to come out from A here, 23.5 metres. Now the sharp-eyed among you will realise that my scale ruler only goes up to 15 metres. So let me just place that on there as an extension of that line. There. And then I'm going to have to use an ordinary ruler to give me the extra that I need. So we've got 15 metres, we want an extra 8.5. So that's going to be 17 on our scale, on our ruler, which is to here. So that point there is H, which is on the boundary, which is 23.5 metres from A. Now another technique we used to measure the manhole cover was an offset measurement, where we came out from the corner of the house, which we were calling A, and it happened that we came out 0.65 metres, and then we eyed in the centre of the drain cover at right angles to the house, and we came out 3.2 metres to the centre. So let's see what that looks like in reality. So we're coming out from A, 0.65, which gives us a point here, and then we come out at right angles from the house like this. I'll just draw in a guideline, and we came out along that distance 3.2 metres. So we're starting from here, 3.2 metres is there. That's the centre of the drain cover, and then we measured out the dimensions of the cover from there. So it's 5.5 that way on. Oh, sorry, 5.5 is there. And we were 4.5 the other way. And that will just give us the inspection cover. The final technique we used for getting objects at a distance from the main building was triangulation. We did triangulation several times, but one of those times was for the tree in the centre of the garden. So you'll recall that triangulation was based on 3 measurements. One measurement was using the house, which is a fixed measurement, and the other 2 were taking points A to the centre and point B to the centre. Now you'll see how those measurements work in reality. So We know that A and B are here. We already measured from the corner of the house to B, so we don't have to do that again. They're known to us as A and B. But the measurement of A to the tree, according to our survey here, was 12.2. Now, it gets a little bit tricky here because here I am with some conventional compasses, and unless you've got a special adaptation on your compass, you won't be able to get up to 12.2. So we have a couple of choices here. One thing we can do is to invest in a beam compass, which is this rather splendid thing here. Now you can see we can quite easily get 12.2 here. We put our pointy thing in at 0 and we put the pencil lead in at 12.2. And from that we can put our pointy thing in at A and do an arc. Quite a big arc because we don't quite know yet where we're going to intercept that from B. Now the measurement from B to the tree was 11.7. So we go back to the point here at 0 and then we come into 11.7. We put the point in at B and we sweep out at 11.7. Now where those two lines join and where they meet, that is our tree. Now if you don't happen to have a beam compass, and you may well not, you can get around it by using a piece of cotton and a pencil. So if you just hold the piece of cotton tightly with your thumb so you can control it, but near the nib of the pencil, put that on 0 down here, and then with your other hand, I'm using my other hand because I'm right-handed, I come out 12.2, hold that really tightly so I'm sort of being fairly accurate. I put my 12.2 point over there by A, and then I can make an arc with a pencil at 12.2. Do exactly the same thing with 11.7. Start off at 0, pinching it at 11.7, putting my 11.7 point there on B, and then making my arc that way. And where those two intersect, that's where our tree is. So once you've got the survey done in pencil, we need to ink it in. Now I've got a range of drawing pens here which come in a variety of different thickness nibs. Don't use a biro because they're far too messy. And for doing the back wall of the house, a 0.8 is quite a thick one. That will be quite handy for this part. So I'm going to just show you putting in the walls, missing out the doors and windows for just now, like this, and we give the walls a thickness of 30 centimetres usually, so we can make it really look like a proper house. I won't do every last little bit, but I'll just show you how we do the windows. It's quite handy to have a second set square here. So I'm just going part the way down the side there, and then to give the door its recess, we go across like this, and windows similarly. We need a thinner nib to get the detail of the window, and the window is conventionally shown as though it is double glazing, so we've got 4 very slender lines coming across. While I've got the thin nib in my hand, I'm just going to put the step up into the door as well, just there, and remember to put the way the door opens on here. And while I'm about it, I'm just going to put the downpipe in at the correct position and put in ink where the tap is. So that's really all we need to do for the back of the house. You've got the idea that I'll now continue to go round the corner, do the conservatory, and finish off at the opposite end of the house. Okay, now to do the tree. This was the one we took such a lot of trouble over with the triangulation. I measured at the time that the stem of the tree had a diameter of 30 centimetres, so I've measured that in fairly accurately. You can draw that freehand because it's a living thing, not a perfect shape. And we also measured the canopy out at a little over 3 metres, so I've used a pair of compasses to get the circle in, and I'm just going to ink that in freehand. We don't have to be enormously precise about this. And conventionally a broadleaf tree is shown with these little shapes coming out to indicate the foliage and the canopy. So that's all good. And of course, obviously, when I've finished, I'm going to rub out all the pencil lines so we just get this really nice sharp image left. So now I've inked in the tree, my subsequent sketches will be in pencil, and I know I can change those over and over again without rubbing out the tree. Okay, now I'm going to draw in the hedge and the fence at the far end of the property. The hedge is a big old thing, so I'm going to use a thick pen, 0.8 metre nib. This is how we conventionally show deciduous hedges. Ended about here and has a thickness. You don't have to show that, but it gives you a nice feel for what's going on. And then next to that we've got a fence. Now, nice fine nib for the fence, and it has to have a thickness, otherwise a single line along here could mean absolutely anything. But I'll give it a front and a back, and then I will know that that's the line of the fence. While I'm over in this corner, I'm going to use a medium-sized nib at 0.3 just to get in that inspection cover. So, bearing in mind this isn't our finished drawing, so we don't have to be absolutely precise, but as precise as we can be. And I'll just put IC on top just to remind us all that that's an inspection cover. So now we've got everything inked in, it just remains to rub out some of our construction lines, and this will reveal our beautiful drawing underneath, complete clarity. Don't forget also at this stage, when you've been all around the drawing rubbing out, that you need to put on some annotation, and that would include the notes that you made outside. Things like the north sign. We know in this instance it's doing this, so we have north over there. We put on the scale, so mustn't forget what scale we've drawn it at. We also had to put on the other things, like over here it's quite damp, and it's pretty sunny in this corner here, so that can be quite a hot sheltered corner. Don't forget also to write on things like the services, the overhead cables, and the good and bad views, and anything else that you made a note of when you were actually doing the survey. Now you have an accurate plan, you or your landscaper can use your design with confidence.